Every morning, my mother-in-law walked into our house unannounced. "I'm here to inspect how you're taking care of my child," she smirked. I changed the locks, but she showed up with a spare key. Furious, I made one final move, and when she walked in the next time, she was met with a court order that left her screaming. I never imagined that marrying David would mean marrying his mother, Margaret, too. From the moment we said, "I do," she seemed to believe she had an open invitation to our lives and our home. It started subtly. A knock here, a visit there. But soon, it became a daily ritual. Every morning, without fail, Margaret would stroll into our house unannounced. I'd be in the middle of feeding our newborn, hair disheveled, still in pajamas, and there she'd be, standing in the doorway with that familiar smirk. "I'm here to inspect how you're taking care of my child," she'd announce, her eyes scanning the room, looking for any sign of disorder or inadequacy. I tried to be patient. I really did. After all, she was family. But her constant intrusions began to wear on me. It wasn't just the lack of privacy, it was the underlying message that I wasn't good enough, that I couldn't care for my own family without her oversight. One morning, after a particularly sleepless night with the baby, I decided to address the issue. "Margaret," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "I appreciate your concern, but I need some space. Could you please call before coming over?" She raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. "I'm just trying to help, dear. Family doesn't need invitations." I sighed, realizing this conversation wasn't going to lead anywhere productive. Discussing the matter with David was equally frustrating. He seemed caught between his mother and me, unwilling to take a firm stand. "She's just trying to be involved," he'd say. "Maybe she's lonely." Lonely or not, I needed boundaries. So, I took matters into my own hands and changed the locks. It felt drastic, but I was desperate for some control over my own home. The next morning, as I enjoyed a rare moment of peace with my coffee, I heard the unmistakable sound of a key turning in the lock. My heart sank. Margaret stepped in, holding up a shiny new key. "You changed the locks," she stated, more amused than angry. "Yes, Margaret. We needed some privacy," I replied, my voice tinged with frustration. "Well, that's not very welcoming," she huffed, making her way to the kitchen as if nothing had happened. I was at my wit's end. Changing the locks hadn't deterred her, she'd simply gotten a new key. I needed a more definitive solution. Researching my options, I discovered that in our state, repeated uninvited entries could be considered trespassing, even for family members. It felt extreme, but I couldn't live like this any longer. I consulted with a lawyer, who confirmed that I could file for a protective order. It wasn't an easy decision, but after documenting Margaret's repeated intrusions and our attempts to set boundaries, I felt justified. The next morning, as expected, Margaret walked in. But this time, I was ready. I handed her the court order, watching as her face shifted from smugness to shock. "You can't be serious," she whispered, her hands trembling. "I'm sorry, Margaret, but this has gone too far. We need our space," I said firmly. She screamed, a sound filled with rage and disbelief, before storming out. David was devastated. It took time, counseling, and countless conversations, but eventually, he understood the toll his mother's behavior had taken on me and our marriage. Margaret kept her distance after that. Our mornings became peaceful, our home truly ours. It was a hard-fought battle, but in the end, we reclaimed our sanctuary. For a few weeks after the court order, everything was calm. No surprise visits. No snide comments over my cooking. No icy glares while I nursed our baby. Just silence. David tried to keep things normal, but the tension was thick. He was stuck in the middle. I knew he didn't blame me, not really, but I also knew he missed her. It's hard to explain the kind of pressure that builds when you're the one who split a family apart. Then, one afternoon, David came home from work looking off. Not tired, just nervous. He sat me down at the kitchen table. "She's hired a lawyer," he said quietly. I blinked. "What?" "She's trying to challenge the court order. Says it's not fair. Says you manipulated the judge. Claims you lied about everything." I stared at him. I wasn't surprised Margaret would stoop this low, but hearing it out loud hit differently. "I documented everything," I said, trying to stay calm. "Every visit. Every time she walked in without knocking. Every time I asked her to stop." He nodded. "I know. I believe you. But she's not just fighting it. She's making it public." Turns out, Margaret had started telling everyone, friends, family, people at her church, that I was unstable, that I was controlling, that I was keeping her away from her grandchild out of spite. She even started posting on Facebook, vague enough to avoid a lawsuit, but clear enough for anyone who knew us. Things like, it's heartbreaking when someone poisons your child against you. Some women only marry to divide, not build. I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't defend myself. I knew that reacting would only feed her narrative. But then she went a step further. A few days later, I was home alone with the baby when I heard the doorbell. Not the sound of a key, thankfully. Just the bell. I peeked through the peephole and felt my stomach twist. It was Margaret, holding a bouquet of flowers, with a camera crew. I didn't open the door. She stayed out there for 15 minutes, talking loudly enough for the cameras to hear. I just want to see my grandson, she said in her sweetest voice. Is it a crime to love your family? Then she walked to her car and drove off. 2 days later, a video popped up online. Some niche family rights YouTube channel featured it. The title? Grandmother blocked from seeing grandchild, daughter-in-law goes too far? The video went semi-viral. Comments exploded with strangers weighing in. Some called me evil. Some called Margaret crazy. But all of it was public. All of it dragged my family into a spotlight we never asked for. David tried to get the video taken down, but once something's online, it spreads. I started getting DMs. Some were threats. Some were just nasty. And then, CPS showed up. Someone, wonder who, had filed a report claiming our baby was being neglected. The caseworker was polite but firm. She inspected the house. Asked me a lot of questions. Took notes. Looked at our baby, who was clean, fed, and smiling, and didn't find anything wrong. Still, it shook me to my core. I knew now this wasn't just overbearing mother-in-law behavior. Margaret wanted war. And she wasn't afraid to get dirty. That night, after the baby was asleep, I sat on the couch with David and said quietly, if she wants war, I'll give her one. David didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me. You're not alone, he said finally. And that's when I started planning my next move. I started keeping a journal. Every call, every message, every strange car parked near our house. I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. I didn't tell David everything right away. He was already stressed, juggling work, the CPS visit, and his guilt. He was caught between loyalty to his mom and love for his wife. I didn't want to add more to his plate. But I needed to be ready because I had a feeling Margaret wasn't done yet. I was right. A week later, I picked up the baby from daycare, and the teacher, Miss Carey, looked uncomfortable. Hey, Sarah, she said carefully, can we talk for a second? My stomach tightened. She led me to the office and pulled out a copy of the daycare pickup list. Margaret's name had been added. Somehow, someone had called and updated the emergency contact list. And apparently, it had happened over the phone. Did you approve this? Carrie asked. No, I said, my voice cold. I didn't. She nodded. We thought it was odd. That's why we didn't release him to her. But she was here. Margaret had come to the daycare. She had tried to pick up my child. I thanked Carrie, took my son, and drove straight to the police station. I was shaking the whole time, but I got it done. Filed a report. Updated our restraining order. Added the daycare. The police promised they'd contact Margaret and warn her again. That should have scared her. It didn't. 2 nights later, David was out late with friends. I was home, feeding the baby, when the power suddenly went out. Whole house dark. I froze. It was storm season, so maybe, but no. I looked outside. My neighbor's porch lights were still on. Just us. I called David. No answer. I called the electric company. No outages reported. Then I heard it. A knock. Soft. At the back door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I called 911. When the cops arrived, they didn't find anyone. But they did find cut wires by our breaker box. Someone had tampered with it. That was the night I installed cameras. Not the cheap kind, real ones. Full coverage. Backyard. Front door. Side windows. 3 days later, we caught her on video. 2:42 a.m. Margaret. On our property. Walking up to our baby's window. Just standing there. Watching. I brought the footage to my lawyer. We filed for a full restraining order. We already had one, but this was a whole new level. This wasn't meddling. This was obsession. David finally saw it. All of it. There was no defending her anymore. He cut contact. He blocked her number. He told her never to contact him again. We were shaken, but we thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end. It wasn't. A few days later, David's car was broken into at work. Nothing stolen, just the car seat slashed, cut to pieces, with a note stuck to the dashboard. You're letting her ruin everything. No signature. But we didn't need one. We moved the next week. Didn't tell anyone the new address, not even extended family. We changed our numbers. Got new phones. It felt like witness protection. But we had no choice. A few peaceful days passed. It was quiet. No knocks. No messages. No CPS. Nothing. Until the letter arrived. Typed. No return address. Inside were copies of court documents. Margaret had filed for grandparents' rights. She was suing us for visitation. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about control. This woman truly believed she had a legal right to our child. This wasn't over. Not even close. I won't lie, I cried when I read the papers. It wasn't just the shock of being sued. It was the weight of everything leading up to it. The broken boundaries. The threats. The smear campaign. The CPS visit. The daycare incident. The night she stood outside our baby's window. Now she was asking a judge to force us to let her back into our lives. Into our child's life. I felt like I couldn't breathe. David was furious. I'd never seen him like that before. He punched the kitchen wall. He threw his phone across the room. But most of all, he looked betrayed. Betrayed by the woman who raised him. He blamed himself. I blamed myself too, for waiting too long to stand up for us. For thinking, maybe she'll calm down, for being polite when I should have drawn the line hard from the start. We lawyered up, again. This time, it wasn't just about protecting ourselves. It was about protecting our child. In court, Margaret sat there dressed like a saint. Pearl earrings. Pale pink cardigan. She even brought photos of her holding our baby, smiling, as if those stolen moments proved she was just a loving grandma. She told the judge I was unstable, jealous, overly possessive. She painted herself as a victim. Said she feared for her son's well-being, said she had to intervene. I sat there, shaking with rage. David held my hand under the table. Then it was our turn. We presented everything. The logs, the texts, the daycare testimony, the police reports, the CPS investigation. And then, the footage. The one from 2:42 a.m., her standing outside our baby's window in the dark. The room went silent when that video played. Margaret tried to speak, tried to cry, to explain. But it was too late. She couldn't talk her way out of this one. The judge leaned forward, stone-faced. This is not a case of a loving grandparent being denied access. This is a case of harassment, manipulation, and a dangerous disregard for boundaries. He denied her petition for grandparents' rights. Then he issued a permanent restraining order. She was barred from contacting us or our child in any way, for any reason, indefinitely. But it didn't end there. Turns out, filing a false CPS report is a crime. Tampering with a breaker box? Also a crime. So is showing up at daycare trying to pick up a child you have no legal custody of. She was arrested 2 weeks later. I got the call from our lawyer first. Then the detective. Then the news stations started calling. Her video had gone viral, remember? Well, now people were curious about what really happened. Suddenly, everyone who'd believed her saw the truth. She became a punchline in her community. The grandma with a restraining order. Her church distanced itself. Her friends stopped answering. David was quiet the day she was taken in. He didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He just stared out the window for a long time. She was my mom, he said. But you were right. We sat in silence. I wish I could say I felt good about the outcome. But honestly, I just felt tired. Angry. Hollow. I wish I'd trusted my instincts sooner. I wish I hadn't let politeness drag us through hell. But we made it out. She lost everything trying to control us. And for what? To prove a point? To win a fight? All she won was a permanent seat on the outside. We moved again, this time across the country. Clean slate. New city. Just us three. No one walks into our home uninvited anymore. Not ever again.